from that ready position now, we've understood that all we have to do is turn. A couple things to be, again, I hate to reiterate, but the elbow tends to want to bend because it's a hinge joint, it wants to bend this way. We don't have the problem on the forehand volley because it can't bend the other way. We only see this problem on the backhand side. So one thing you'll want to do initially when you're working on your backhand volley is be very conscious of keeping that elbow locked and firm. Now, I had a few players actually argue with me that says, well, some of the pros I've seen don't have a straight arm. Well, I'm going to argue that for one reason. The only couple players I've seen, like Patrick Rafter, actually had a bent elbow. But the bent elbow stayed bent through the stroke. So it still acted like a straight arm. It wasn't like he bent it and straightened it through the shot. You never saw him do that. The elbow was slightly bent, and it stayed bent through his entire backhand. So it still operated on the same function we're talking about. But for most players, that's not a good way to learn because the natural tendency is if the elbow's bent is to naturally straighten it. So that's why we tell players right now, focus on that elbow straight from beginning to end. Now, a couple other key position points for the backhand volley is if I'm in a ready position, my arms are close to my side. All I have to do is turn, get the elbow straight, keep the racket head up. One of the things that a lot of players do is they start to drop the racket head. Then they have to come up to hit the volley and they wonder why they hit it out. So from this position, the racket should always be above the ball. We're going to talk a little bit about how to impart the right kind of spin and why we use spin in just a moment. But if we start here, we can always come down to meet the ball in a slicing action, which we'll talk about. The hips, the legs all follow the lead of the shoulders. So if I turn my shoulders, my hips have already turned sideways. I can hit a volley without stepping, I'm fine. But the one thing I usually caution players who don't step is this. If I don't turn, I tend to swing around my hip line. So if my hips don't get all the way turned, I tend to swing away from the target line more. So if I'm trying to drive that ball straight, I'm going to want to get my lead foot in front to coordinate my hips and my shoulders so that my stroke is linear to the target. This is one shot in tennis that is truly linear, meaning we are going to strike the ball in the line that we want the intended target to go. It's not like a ground stroke where we wrap around and hit the topspin. We talk about angular momentum later. The backhand volley is very linear, and we just simply think of the arm as a pendulum. This is the pendulum on a grandfather clock. I'm not making any statement how old I am, but this is a long arm that just simply falls forward to meet the ball. If I learn to do that, I'm always going to be able to get the racket on the ball. The other thing you'll want to also make sure you do is to hit and hold. When you turn, you've already set the racket to the target, so what we call set. Now as I hit the ball, I want to hold this position so that my racket is still facing the target. This is a governor. This is a way to make sure I'm doing everything right. Because if I hit and I hold here, I'm going to notice that I don't want the ball to go way over there. That means my timing had to be more perfect. If I simply hit, set, hold, I can hit the ball from here to here to here to here, and guess where the ball is going to go? It's going to go to my target every time as long as I hit the strings. But if I hit and I go like this, if I hit here, okay, the ball goes in, but if I hit here, it goes over to the right. So I want to set, hit, and hold as long as I can. More advanced players, you'll see what we call a recovery phase, where they'll hit and then they'll recover, and you'll see this sort of blurred, they don't really hold that finish. Be understanding that when you hold the finish, you're always going to be guaranteed a pretty darn good shot to the target you're aiming for. If I start adding a little bit of a turn, I'm going to start having to be more precise with the timing of the shot. Now you can use your offhand to help you with all the facilitation of hitting a good backhand volley. One of the things, when you turn, use that left hand, if you're right-handed, to cradle the racket at the throat, to help frame the racket, if you will. A lot of times the players turn, if they don't use that racket, the racket simply flops back. They don't know it because they're focusing on the incoming ball with their eyes and their mind. So all of a sudden, if they don't have anything to help consciously hold that racket in place, it will flop down. If the racket gets into this position, this is one of the big mistakes a lot of players make, even those who use a continental grip, is they start to, if the racket starts here, I only have one movement to meet the ball, and that's forward. So again, like turning this way, we can have difficulty controlling the ball if we're going this way. If I hit the ball a little bit late, it's going to go way high and way out. If I hit the ball a little bit early, it's going to go in the bottom of the net. So one thing you want to, again, is minimize how much the racket has to recover to hit the ball. First thing is to set that racket with that left hand. That left elbow kind of raises up, but you'll see a lot of high-level players with that elbow very, very high to help keep that. If this elbow drops, sometimes the racket will flop down. Now, high and low volleys. Again, backhand volleys tend to feel weak at first, and the reason they feel weak is not only because the grip initially feels weak, but they're using bad form. If a player starts with the racket here, there's a tendency to feel like they have to do this. This is very weak, especially if I hit the ball late and I'm using just this wristy motion, this little internal rotation of the forearm to try to hit the ball. Very weak, and it hurts if you hit the ball late. So what you'll want to do is on a high ball, get the racket above the ball and again drive down and through your target line. Don't feel like you have to turn it into a little mini overhead. Likewise on a low volley. Get that arm straight, keep the racket head high, use your knees as your elevators to get you down. I like to always tell my students, try to keep your eyes level with the ball. So if the ball goes down, my eyes go down with it. If that happens, my racket doesn't have to change anything. It's doing exactly the same thing as I did if I was standing here. And if I just drop the knees, I'm just doing the same exact movement. I don't have to do a different shot for a high ball, mid ball, or low ball if I maintain the integrity of this arm position. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to get a low ball effectively hit using spin here in a moment. But I want you to really realize how important it is that you don't do this. A lot of players, you get a low ball, they don't bend their knees, so what has to happen is they have to drop the racket head. Now they're hitting the ball up like this. And again, you hit the ball late, you're in the net. If you hit the ball early, you're way out. So here, you can slice the ball. Let's talk a little bit about how to use spin to control the ball. Now, in addition to the left hand cradling and locking the racket in position, as a player drives through the ball to help facilitate this set and hold, this left hand has a very important role, and that is to spread apart, because we want to maintain the integrity of this shoulder line to our target. If I'm aiming right to my right here, I want to make sure that that shoulder line doesn't turn, because that's where my racket will end up going. So what I want to do here is as I get my arm up, my racket head high, as I drive through the ball, I have a little reactionary move with my left arm. That allows me to keep that shoulder from rotating out. So I pull that arm back, and you'll see virtually every top player, given a backhand volley, pull that left arm back. You'll see it a lot on sliced backhands too. When they come in and slice backhand, you'll see that arm drop back again to help control the hips and the shoulder line. So remember how to use this left arm in conjunction, in orchestrated movement, to keep the plane of the racket in the line of the target throughout the swing. These all contribute to that goal. If my goal is to keep the racket from set to hold on the target line, my left arm's got to go back. Now I can try to keep it here, but I tell you, it is hard if you're going to bring this arm forward to keep this shoulder from pulling out. When you're learning this shot, and again, as I've said, top players, pull that arm back, bam, and they're going to hit a great volley every time. One other point on the backhand volley is we've talked about how the left arm pulls back, but there's also a roll of the back left foot if you're right-handed. This is a very subtle thing that you will see every player do, but very few, even pros, catch this. And that is, as I hit that volley, I'm not going to want to let this back leg come around, because look what happens to my hip. My hips are pointed to the target, and I want to maintain that. But if I let that back leg swing around, my hips swing around. Now I've lost the integrity of the direction I'm trying to hit the ball. So a lot of times when players are in a very quick exchange, you'll actually not only see that foot stay back, but you'll actually see them kick it back in a very quick little move before they recover. A lot of people miss this because they see the recovery, but they fail to catch the foot going back before the recovery. So a lot of players, they see that recovery and they think, oh, I bring that leg around. No, and not unless you want to lose control. Keep the leg back, then recover. Keep those two moves completely independent of each other.